I can't even trust my own eyes. Study said, the experts claim the world will never be the same. The research shows, the study proves. Trust the experts. This is false, it's misunderstood. It's been debunked. This isn't good. It's getting worse. It's getting worse. It's getting worse. It's all your fault. And then they lie, persuade, confuse. Can't think about it. I could die tonight. Bright lights will hide it. Take my time, control my mind in time. I can't even trust my own eyes. And I know that you care, but tell me why am I so scared? And then they lie, persuade, confuse, can't think about it. I could die tonight, bright lights will hide it. Take my time, destroy my mind in time. I can't even trust my own eyes.
Bill C-9 comes into effect at midnight tonight. Are Christians in Canada safe? Are they safe from prosecution? We even have the parliamentarians themselves, the Liberal MPs themselves, who are pushing through this legislation saying, yes, parts of the Bible would be criminal hate speech. That's pretty concerning. We had a tremendous amount of Christian organizations saying, we don't want this, even though churches were the most common place of worship that have been burnt to the ground over the past several years here in Canada. Is that not being the most hated? But yet, the Christians were not listened to, and Bill C-9 has been thrust down our throats, and it is coming into effect tomorrow. I'm so happy to have a doubleheader interview lined up. We're going to be talking to Artur Pawlowski, one of the most persecuted men in the country, in many respects because of his Christian beliefs. So we'll be talking all about that. But first, I have a religious studies professor. He was in the documentary that I did on free speech, and he's written a new book called Christ or Collapse, all about, Christian society and how if we don't get back to that, well, things are not going to go well for us. But without further ado, let me introduce the one and only David Miller Haskell. How you doing today, sir?
I'm great, thanks. What a great introduction.
I do what I can with what I got, but I kind of want to jump back just to, you came to the screening of The Hate Network. The upcoming documentary will have a new title, but you were at the initial screening in the GTA for The Hate Network. Thanks for coming up for that. And during the Q&A, one of your answers kind of gave me a curveball, because during the Q&A, I asked the people on stage something to do with free speech and its importance. And you're kind of like, yeah, I don't know if I like free speech. I don't know if I actually like it. I don't know if I like all these leftists saying things like trans women are women. I think I would actually maybe like a law where they're not allowed to say things like that. And I'm like, you know what? Doesn't really work for what we're talking about with the documentary, but I think that is a perspective that is gaining. It's a perspective that's gaining more sort of, we'll say, momentum and energy, which is, it's almost like all of these people who are trying to usurp more power and influence in our society, they don't want that kind of to be a mutual thing, because, in many respects, Christians are the ones at the receiving end of a lot of the prosecution and kind of like lopsided unfairness. But I don't know where you wanted to start. Maybe kind of give us a summary of the book that you've recently published. It's quite exciting.
I'll tell you about that. But just to pick up on, or to pull on a thread that you've introduced,
sure. This
idea of coexistence between antithetical ideologies, it doesn't make sense. It is unworkable. And so when I say something like, I'm actually against complete free speech, I want to go back to the free speech that we saw before 1960. And people say, well, and people are already accusing me because of the book, Christ or Collapse. They're already saying, oh, you want a theocracy, you want to have a totalitarian regime. And I say, no, I want to go back to pre-1960s. And nobody in their right mind, no historian, no politician, no observer ever said that pre-1960s Canada or pre-1960s America was a theocracy or a totalitarian regime. And in fact, the very opposite. They said these are the most free, prosperous nations in the world. And that's why everybody wanted to come and still wants to come. So that's my first salvo there. So how do we find that balance? The balance is, let's take moral absolutes that have worked in the West for over 1,000 years and have established the most prosperous nations in the world, and let's just get back to them. It's a restoration. You mentioned my book. Thanks very much for that. I'm going to hold it up here. Shameless plug. But essentially, what I've done is I've said, let's look at the evidence. I'm not arguing for a religious revival. I'm arguing for a restoration of what works. And how do you know if something works? Well, you study it empirically. So my day job is a social scientist, and I have assembled probably what is the most complete collection of data to show what leads to societal and individual flourishing. And the clear winner in all the empirical research are the norms and values of Christianity. So if someone is coming against my book, Christ or Collapse, and they're saying, no, you're not right. Well, I'm going to say, well, show me your studies, because I've shown you over 1,000. I've got over 1,000 references to scholarly works to show that time and again, across nations, across individual communities, there is nothing that matches Christian norms and values for bringing societal flourishing. And what do I mean by societal flourishing? I mean, you have the highest trust in society. You've got the highest levels of volunteering, highest levels of charity, honesty, economic growth, industry. So our experiment since the 1960s has failed. This experiment said that there can be such a thing as a neutral public square. There can't. Laws are going to point toward a moral direction. Let's choose the moral direction that has a proven and empirical track record.
Absolutely. So has anyone written a book like this before? Because it's simple enough, but it's like, has anyone actually come out and said this in a sort of like organized way of actually Christianity has the best outcomes? Here's all the receipts.
I don't think so. I think what we've seen a division. Usually when somebody writes what's called an apologetic. So an apologetic is a defense of Christianity. Typically, they're going the theological route, and they're saying, here's why the Bible is historically true. Here's why Jesus rose from the dead as a physical body, and they're pulling out those proofs. And those are excellent. I'm not against those at all. I'm a practicing Christian, and I've looked at those, and I've said, they're compelling, they're rigorous, and I think they offer the best answer. But I don't think anybody has ever said, people who aren't Christians can be convinced by the evidence alone that Christian norms and values are what we should have in society. And what made me think that this was a valid way to go is I looked at people like Joe Rogan and Russell Brand, and both of them, before they Joe Rogan, he wouldn't call himself a Christian at this point. He is going to church right now. But before they even began to talk about the metaphysical side of Christianity, they were already convinced by the empirical side. It's just undeniable that there is better life in a Christian society. And so they looked at that and they said, okay, well, maybe there's something more divine about this if I looked at the theological side. So I don't think anybody's done a book like this because I think that, one, most academics really don't like Christianity, and they endeavor to make it look like it is something that is oppressive. And secondly, the other people who are playing in this camp, they tend to go the theological route.
Mm-hmm. That's so interesting. And yeah, if you guys want to look it up, again, it's Christ or Collapse. You can look up David Millard Haskell's Twitter account, D Millard Haskell, and there's links to more information there. We'll talk about reviews. We'll connect it to C-9, but you brought up something that I really wanted to pull on, which is academics don't really like Christianity. And isn't it interesting, because there's a lot of stories in the Bible. I think there's a lot of, I've actually started to read the Bible for the very first time, like not cover to cover, but like book by book in the Bible. And there's just so much terrific storytelling. And there's like the story of the persecuted minority, like all over the place. Like there's so many examples of this. There's so many examples of like the power of compassion, helping the needy, and all these things, which in a way are sort of all leftist coded, if I could use the kind of crude term. But why are they throwing the baby out with the bathwater? Why are academics almost so oppositional to this, when in theory, based on what they believe with their compassion, should they not at least hold on to bits and pieces of the Bible? Or,
that's a really good observation. I have thought about that a lot. And you're saying that Christianity, in its championing of compassion, really is a world leader. So why wouldn't they just get on board with that? There was an author, his name was G.K. Chesterton. He's an English guy. And he noted that today's progressivism is just Christian virtue gone mad. And another way that I would address that is it's Christian virtue gone unbalanced. So Christianity is genius because it has always been able to keep in tension two equal and opposite forces. So within Christianity is the idea of mercy, but also is the idea of justice. And Christians are called to support both. But what the left does today is mercy, 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 especially for a truck driver who was incompetent, who was ill-trained, maybe didn't even have his real license, and he kills people on the 401. Oh, we don't want to sentence him. It might affect his ability to get citizenship in Canada. We see people who have raped young children in their care, and again, they are given mercy. Whereas Christianity says, no, there are times where justice is where we need to go. Similarly, we see this notion of the difference between grace and truth. Well, grace says, let's give you unmerited favor. But truth says sometimes to be the most loving, you've got to be the most harsh. Well, we're afraid to cause offense now. And it's absolutely because we've lost true Christianity, the both sides of Christianity. Our society's in the mess it is. Christianity was always a balance. And these are not my ideas. They're rooted in doctrine. And then they used to be actually part of our laws. And then in the 1960s, they said, we've got to get rid of that Christian component in the name of pluralism and tolerance. And we abandoned those moral absolutes that actually were what moored our society, moored our civilization to success. So why do academics hate Christianity? I'm going to give you a very quick reason. And it is because Christianity is telling them that there is somebody, which is God, who actually knows more than they do, and also calls them to a higher law. So if you go back to the very first story in the Bible, the very first story is Adam and Eve. They want to be able to determine what good and evil is. The very first sin of all humanity, when humanity falls, is that we decide, or the first humans decide, they want to determine what good and evil is. Well, that is what university professors are today. They're angry at Christianity because they want to. The university professors want to determine what good and evil is. And they really don't like. Go ahead.
Yeah. So the important word there is to know, right? They want to know what good and evil is, because the first sin is the biting of the apple, the forbidden fruit of like the tree of knowledge. Like you will know all of these things.
Right.
So that's interesting, because it's almost like an active thing as an academic is like, well, I'm going to know more and I'm going to kind of like learn and learn and learn. I guess in a way it's like, I think Gad Saad had the idea of like, they're always looking for more racism. I'm kind of butchering it now, but
right.
But as an academic, you're always looking for more knowledge. This is kind of getting off, not necessarily on a tangent, but a lot of this came from this postmodernism, and now postmodernism is kind of just constantly eating itself and eating whatever is left in sight, and it's just kind of this ongoing thing of more knowledge, and it's now it's kind of unrecognizable, when it kind of obliterates objective morality and objective truth.
Okay, and you mentioned this word objective morality. You see, at some point you need to have an absolute. And you just do. Because if you don't have an absolute that is created by God, you will have an absolute that is created by man, by humans. So today, our absolutes are things like you cannot say that a biological man can't become a woman. That's now like under gender ideology. So you will always have absolutes that are enforced. You will always have blasphemy laws that are enforced. But the problem is when you have someone who is not absolute making a moral absolute, there's no validity. But when you have God making the moral absolute, and God has the best interests of human beings in mind, then those moral absolutes can guide society toward thriving. And now that's a theological claim. And in my book, Christ or Collapse, I say, I'm going to prove that theological claim. I'm not even going to appeal to theology. I'm just going to show you the extent to which human beings align with the doctrine of Christianity. They surpass everybody else in terms of their economic success, in terms of their happiness, life satisfaction, their marriages, their children. So I don't have to argue from a theological position because I've got empirical evidence.
And just to play devil's advocate of what the leftist would say, they would say, like, this would be their counter argument to your book. Well, David, there's a lot of white supremacy and colonization of persecuting other minorities. And that's the only reason that these societies were better, is because they were persecuting others. This is just a happenstance. People just happen to be more moral. They just happen to be good neighbors. Nothing to do with Christianity whatsoever. They just happen to be good. Also, because they persecuted and colonized other people. I'm actually, it's kind of falling apart as I try to.
Well, no, but obviously they will always want to give another reason. So, I mean, I go at this at length in the book, but I'll give you one example, right? And I always, as best I can, I try to appeal to really rigorous statistical evidence. So on this topic, their argument is that goodness can happen anywhere, and that a society will just develop goodness because some people are good and some people aren't, and it has nothing to do with Christianity. So I would say to them, okay, I'm going to give you a study that is really, it's equivalent to E equals MC squared. This is a study that blew the roof off social science. And it was done by a guy named Robert Woodbury. Now, Robert Woodbury in 2016 produces this study, and he publishes it in the American Journal of Political Science, top journal in the world for political science. And the name of the article is The Missionary Roots of Liberal Democracy. And what did Woodbury do? Well, Woodbury took 12 years to do this study, and he gathered thousands and thousands and thousands of data points across the developing world, because what he wanted to do was answer the question, why is it that you can have two countries next to each other in Africa, or next to each other in Oceania, next to each other at any part in the developing world, and one country will develop the criteria of liberal democracy, education, human rights, economic success, and yet the other one right next door to it doesn't. And instead it descends into tyranny. Yet the geographical and the populations are almost identical. Geographically and population-wise are almost identical. How does this difference happen? So 12 years he takes to publish this study, gathering all these data points. And he says, oh my goodness, here's the difference. The key variable driving whether or not there was liberal democracy, that is the best society you can have, the goodness of society, the key variable, did they have believing evangelical Protestants working with the native population? That was a key variable. It wasn't guns, it wasn't germs, it wasn't steel. It was whether or not they had people on fire for Jesus working with the local population, because those people put others before themselves, because those people established voting for the native population. They established hospitals, they established educational institutions, and that was the key difference. And then people attacked Woodbury for this. But time and again, when they looked at his data, they said, oh my gosh, this guy's right. So I give that example, and I have many more in the book, Christ or Collapse. But that's just one example where the empirical evidence shows that you can't get these successes without Christianity. And I'm not the only one who looked at this. You can look at Tom Holland's book, Dominion.
You're in America.
You can look at Larry Siedentop. He's from Oxford, his book that says The Inventing of the Individual. That's the title of the book, where he says, you wouldn't have human rights without Christianity. You could look at Rodney Stark. He was a professor at Baylor University and then Washington University before that. And he says that you can attribute all of the success of the West to Christianity. You could talk about Harold Berman, who is a Harvard professor who wrote 2 volumes saying that our legal system, which is the envy of the world, is rooted specifically in Christian doctrine. So you can look at all these academics who are saying exactly what I'm saying, and they're coming to the same conclusions. So when a leftist comes to me and says, well, where are your receipts? I say, well, I've just given you them. Where are yours?
Yeah. Once again, the book is Christ or Collapse, The Case Against Godless Government. A lot of great topics that you bring up. This is kind of one of the promo videos, but you kind of tie together, obviously, the LGBT, trans madness. You talk about mass immigration, and you don't really say it in this video here, but I do think there's a sort of, I call it kind of broadly like just degeneracy among the native population, usually European people, where like they've become consumers. They've become obsessed with the material world. They don't go to church anymore, and they don't even honor their own past or history anymore. And like, this hits home for me because it's like within my own friends and family, I see this all the time. And it's all connected. When I see the kind of shortcomings of our government and these policies, and like nobody seems to care, and it's because we're kind of just attached to the material things, and we just want to have money before we die, and we're not thinking about the legacy of ourselves or the legacy of our nation, and how we can plant a tree today to have shade for the generation tomorrow. Do you go into that kind of specific topic of how these nations, they've come away from Christ, and they've also kind of like lost their sort of nationhood at the same time?
Yeah, there's so much I could say on that, Greg, but I'll give you an example. I'm almost hesitant because I want people to read the book, but at one point in the book, to your point about people becoming materialistic, I first make the theological point that within Christianity, it is one of the main ideas of Christianity is that you are going to be a slave to something. So Jesus just does the complete end run on this. And he says, I want you to be a slave to me. I want you to be a slave to the gospel. And as the Apostle Paul works this out in his letters in the New Testament, he says, don't you get it? You're going to be a slave to something. So you better be a slave to the master who only wants the best for you. You want to be a slave to the master who is actually the Father, who loves you and wants the best for you, because then you are already filling up that slave category and nothing else can fill it. Those things that are going to destroy you, you can't be a slave to them because you are a slave to the ultimate. You are a slave to the transcendent. You are a slave to the ultimate good. And when you are a slave to the ultimate good, nothing can touch you. You will find your greatest success. So I bring that up because then in my book, in chapter 6, I kind of pull in pop culture and I say, Bob Dylan knew this. So Bob Dylan, he goes through this Christian stage, and he actually was a devout Christian for a bit. He lost it, but for a bit he was. And he writes this song called You Gotta Serve Somebody. And the lyric says, it might be the devil or it might be the Lord, but you got to serve somebody. And there's a truth in that. It's like you have to be a slave to something. So choose the slavery that actually leads to freedom. There's the paradox. Choose the slavery that goes to freedom. Well, John Lennon, who's a buddy of our good friend Bob Dylan, writes a contrary song, kind of a rebuttal to You Gotta Serve Somebody. And it was, you gotta serve yourself. And really, in that, and by the way, gotta serve somebody gets a Grammy. It's Bob Dylan's first Grammy. You got to serve yourself. It rots in oblivion. Sorry, John Lennon, but it just didn't. And there's a parable in that too. Those people who actually accept Bob Dylan's idea, you got to serve somebody, you actually do see greater success. If you accept John Lennon's idea, serve yourself, you actually fall into ruin, sort of like his song did. But throughout my book, in chapter 3, I show that those people who really do take the materialistic stand, those people who embrace this what would be called almost a libertarian or classical liberal idea that I just want to have freedom for me, they're not satisfied. And that's not my opinion. That's the psychological survey saying that. And when you multiply that at the level of community, you get places like San Francisco, where people are pooping on the street, or Vancouver. The more you have people looking out for themselves, the worse your society gets. But it's not a matter of education. It's a matter of motivation. And people are motivated by their most keen beliefs, and Christianity as a belief system is unmatched for producing societal good.
That's amazing. So there's even part of the book then where you're actually talking about psychology as well, where like psychologically.
100%. Yeah.
Oh, cool.
I am determined to show in all the social scientific ways that Christianity is unmatched. I compare Christianity to the results of other religions. Like I sometimes in my class, I'll get, I'll say to my students, I want you to put up your hand if you think that all religions are the same. All religions produce the same effect, or all cultures produce the same effect, whichever you want. And most of them put up their hand now because they've been told in this multicultural world we live in that one is not better than another. And then I start pulling out the data. And I say, do you realize that belief drives behavior? And Christian belief is unique. Christian belief says, if someone is in trouble, you help them. Now, that is very specifically, if someone is suffering through no fault of their own, that there's a big difference there, right? If somebody is they are an economic immigrant and they're coming to Canada and they're not really suffering at all, and they just want to take advantage of a system that they didn't create. Christianity is very clear. No, I am not obligated in that area. But Christianity is obligated to help people who are suffering through no fault of their own and who are outside our tribe. Jesus was asked, who's my neighbor? And in his famous story of the Good Samaritan, he says, anybody who needs help. And so when you look at the data, I show study after study that Christians take that to heart. There was a study in the Journal of the Red Cross that found among aid organizations in the developing world, it's only Christians who will assist those who are non-Christians. You see, that also applies to charity, by the way. Christians across the world are the greatest givers to charity. In India, you know who gives the most to charity? Christians in India. But here's the idea. Belief drives behavior. I've just said that Christians believe that you must help people even outside your tribe. Well, within Islam, their charity, called the zakat, which is 2.5% of their income, it's prescribed only to other Muslims. There are 5 schools of Sunni Islam, and each of them have vindicated that. Each of them has said, yeah, if you're giving zakat, it's for the good of other Muslims. Christians look at that and like, what? But the studies have shown that too. If you're a Hindu, the reason that Christians are so beloved by the underclass in India is because they're the ones who will extend the greatest charity to them. And why is that? Because if you are a religious Hindu person, you think that karma says people are getting what they deserve. Why would you want to give charity to someone who's only getting what they deserve? So within India, the greatest amount of charity is done by Christians because they think, well, karma's not a thing, but compassion is. The problem in India, by the way, and I go into this at length in chapter 7 of my book, I talk about how India under Modi, so Modi is the president right now, Modi has removed over 10,000 licenses from Christian organizations in India because they have been so successful at providing aid, and many of the delete or the untouchables have been converting to Christianity. And so he said, well, we got to put a stop to this. So essentially, he has stopped charitable organization. In 2016, I think it was up to 10,000. It's probably more now, because he doesn't want the competition. And by the way, he knows that there's nothing within the Hindu doctrine that says that there should be aid to these people. So Christians were fulfilling that gap. It also calls to mind this idea of religious rights in Canada. What would happen if we behaved in Canada as they do in India? What would happen in Canada if we behaved as they do in Saudi Arabia? So in Saudi Arabia, you can't build a church. In Muslim majority countries, the rights of Christians are completely obliterated. So what if we just said, okay, well, we will extend the rights to you that are extended in your majority countries? Is that fair? And now Christians are very tolerant, but there has to become a point where you can't be a patsy and a dupe either.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't seem very fair. I wanted to bring up kind of secularism, but you already brought up so many great points there, which is, well, I want to go back to what you said about India. You said 10,000 licenses revoked from Christian organizations in India. And is this like a fact it's because they were being successful, or is that just kind of like the obvious trend of like, oh, any sort of Christian organization that was being successful in India got their license revoked? Isn't that interesting?
Yeah. So success is measured by conversion. Success is measured by people gravitating to those organizations.
Sure.
And so if you were overtly preaching the gospel and saying, yeah, I want you to become a Christian, not compelled, by the way, right? This is not at the sword. These are not people being forced at the sword.
Of course.
These are people who were starving, both spiritually and sometimes even physically, and they were aided. So it is natural that when someone is being assisted, that they will look into that particular benefactor. They'll say, well, why are you doing this? You see, people often say, well, they're just becoming Christians because they're being fed. No, because the Christians will feed you even if you don't convert. That's what the studies from the International Journal of the Red Cross showed. They do not compel. Come on in. You can have your food. But what happens is the people say, why are you being like this? Why are you showing compassion to me, even though I'm not part of your tribe? And then they begin to explain the uniqueness of Christianity. And the uniqueness of Christianity still stands out among countries that are not majority Christian, because they say, this is not like we have it here. It's a shame that people in Canada and the United States, they have forgotten how unique their society is. But slowly they'll remember, because their society is going to be ruined unless they reassert the Christian foundation that brought all the thriving that they experience now.
Yeah. When it comes to secularism, I said this on a stream like a couple of weeks ago, but I was talking about the prosecution of Christians and something to do with probably other religions coming into Canada and kind of pushing their sort of values. And I thought they're really taking advantage of our naive. There's some degree of naivety of the sort of Christian values we have now, and like secularism. Is it true that, because this is what I said, I'm assuming it's true because everything I say is true. No, but I said secularism it comes from Christianity. It comes from the Christian value. Like you can only find a secular society in a Christian nation. Is connecting these two dots like correct?
No, I think that's a pretty popular theory right now. It was definitely promoted by Tom Holland in his book Dominion. He was saying that we can see from the Protestant Reformation, you begin to see the elevation of the individual, and we also see a separation of church and state. So Protestantism really does have the seeds of these things. Protestantism was a reaction against Catholicism. So Catholicism at the time was very much a governmental system. The church was very embedded in the government. So the Protestants said, we don't want that. Now, when Protestants say that, by the way, they are saying we don't want the church running the government, but the Protestants admit that every law is pointing in one moral direction or another. So it is completely justified for Christian morality to be the impetus or the catalyst for the law. That's fine. But you don't compel people to believe, but you can compel right action, and the right action as it is revealed in Christian doctrine and the historical record and the empirical evidence, all there. So this idea that secularism does generate from Christianity, you could get there because you could say that from Protestantism, you get the idea of the elevation of the individual, and then that leads to the Enlightenment. And then the Enlightenment, it actually makes the claim that we can have these moral foundations without Christianity. I mean, that really is what the Enlightenment starts to do. It tries to say, let's have all the Christian virtues without the Christian theology. And I talk about this at length in chapter 6. I actually go through the history of how we got here. And essentially, even the Enlightenment is reacting against the wars of religion. So Catholics and Protestants were fighting each other, and with good reason, they say it looks like religion causes a lot of harm. And when religion is being mapped to being the government, not influencing government, but when religion is the government, it actually is a bad thing. I'm against theocracy, and I say so in my book. But I am not against good people of Christian faith influencing the laws based on their doctrine. Because I know that when they do, within their doctrine, it says, I must treat even my opponents with the full rights of everyone else under the law. I mean, only Christianity does that. So Christianity is this fantastic system that we get secularism from. But the problem is when you unmoor it, when you cut it away from its theological basis, from its doctrinal basis, secularism begins to forget about loving your enemies, about being able to extend to everyone the rights under the law. And I'll give you an example from today. So yesterday, there was an article in the CBC, on the CBC, and there was a flood in Ottawa. And the city of Ottawa called on different aid groups, please come and help us. We don't have enough people to take care of the damage. So a Christian aid group called Samaritan's Purse said, we'll come and help. And they did. And they're doing fantastic work there. Well, we have a city councillor from Ottawa, an LGBT person, and we also have an MPP from Ottawa, a provincial politician, also an LGBT person. And they're saying, we want these volunteers who are helping to be banned from our city. Why? Because they're Christian. Why? Because they believe in traditional marriage. So picture, and these people would call themselves secularists, right? So here we have an example of people explicitly wanting to discriminate against other people, and they justify it in the name of tolerance. I mean, wrap your head around that. So the issue is that secularists and those who follow or pretend that they want a neutral public space, they actually don't. They're actually hypocrites. They actually do want to discriminate. It is only the Christians who ever have proven historically that they truly are willing to give people, everybody, even those who don't believe like them, equal rights under the law. In Ottawa, we see that we have a sitting politician at the municipal level and a sitting politician at the provincial level who both want to ban conservative Christians from their city. Like, you can't get more communist than that.
It is funny how it's interesting to call them like secularists, and you're kind of just referring to more like left-wing sort of activist or like the left-wing progressive sentiment when you say that, right? Secularist?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, but it's all one. Like if you said to them, "Hey, you are promoting a really fundamentalist religious doctrine here when you say that Christians must be banned." Like, this sort of sounds like the Christians in the Inquisition who were banning the Jews from cities, and now you want to ban the conservative Christians from your city. Aren't you the same? No. We're neutral. They're just not. They're just liars. And they can't even see their own hypocrisy.
Yeah, and it is interesting how they will be like, yeah, of course we believe in secularism, but then there's a kind of this unique hostility and hatred towards Christians. They'll be like, oh, wow, you're
this is where
I was gonna say you're wearing like, oh, you're wearing a hijab, you're wearing you're wearing a kippah, you're wearing something exotic and foreign that's so cool. But then if it's like a Christian, it's like, well, get the hell out of here. We don't like that. It's very.
And here are Christians who were doing incredible work, volunteering, and the CBC in its coverage of this is so foolish and ignorant. They don't even question the fact that these LGBT supporters, the counselor and the MPP, they are demanding discrimination against Christians, and it doesn't even occur to the CBC reporter to kind of say, well, aren't you asking for discrimination here? You're saying that you want Christians banned because they're discriminatory, and yet you want to discriminate against them, but you actually want to do it. Like, there was no evidence that the Christians were harming anyone. There was no evidence that they were not doing a litmus test saying, hey, before I help you, can you tell me whether you support traditional marriage or not? There was none of that. They were just helping because I help my neighbor. That's what they were saying. And yet these secularists, these progressives, they were determined to exclude and discriminate without evidence. Just based on the beliefs of these people. There's nothing more bigoted than being discriminatory against someone for their internal beliefs, not even their actions. That is the state of Ottawa's city council and the MPP that is now sitting there. It's incredible.
Now let's get into the weeds a little bit on this scenario, because it's a good segue. The city council said, like, we're going to ban these people. Like, what was the specific thing that was said or done?
Just the one. So I was misrepresenting there. It's the one very outspoken LGBT counselor was saying they should be banned. Those were her words, according to the CBC. And the MPP for that particular riding of Ottawa, she also said that Samaritan's Purse, the organization and its people, should not be allowed. So they are literally calling for Christians to be expelled from their city. Like, yeah. Where are our other political leaders speaking up for the rights of Christians? And so that kind of brings us nicely to C-9, doesn't it? We already know.
Yep, we already know. Go ahead.
We already know that C-9 is going to be another tool to make sure that the rights of Christians in Canada are completely destroyed. And so C-9, for those of people who are watching probably know, but essentially what C-9 does is it removes from the criminal code the final protection that Christians had. So under section 319, 3C of the criminal code, it said that if you were making an argument based on scripture then you were protected. You couldn't be charged with a hate crime. Well, that has been removed now. And so if a Christian were to say, I am against same-sex marriage because I am in favor of God's design for marriage, and somebody in the LGBT community gets upset by that, and the Christian says, well, I'm just quoting my scripture. Now, the police, the courts, the government can say, doesn't matter. You're not protected anymore. And so we know the hostility. That example I just gave you from the politician at the municipal and at the provincial level shows the level of hatred they have for Christians. They want them banned from their city. Do you think that they're going to act in good faith for any Christian who dares to espouse their beliefs in public? And we know they won't. And we know that the liberal government is absolutely going to try and punish Christians, because every time they've passed a new law that has intersected with the biblical stand of Christians, they've lied. So in 2005 or 2006, when they passed the same-sex marriage law, they said, don't worry. If you are a Christian and you want to uphold your beliefs in traditional marriage, you'll never be denied a benefit. Well, then, lo and behold, you could look at the Trinity Western Law School case. Trinity Western said, we want to build a law school, and they were denied that benefit by the courts of the Supreme Court of Canada because they were told that their beliefs about traditional marriage made society unsafe. So remember, when the law about same-sex marriage passed, it was specifically said by the liberal government, you won't be denied a benefit. And then the law school was for Trinity Western was denied. You could talk about the funding that has been denied in 2018 to Christians because they would not support a homosexual lifestyle. It was summer jobs funding. The Trudeau government, Justin Trudeau government said, we're not going to give you that. So every time, one more, C-16, that's another lie. So under C-16, the gender identity was made part of the criminal code. And Judy Wilson-Raybould, who was the liberal minister at the time, said, no, don't worry. You can disagree. You can believe that a man can never become a woman and you won't be punished. Well, tell that to Barry Neufeld, who is the school trustee in BC, who was just fined into bankruptcy and to the tune of $750,000 because he had the nerve to espouse his Christian belief that a man can't become a woman. So every time a new law comes in from the liberals and it intersects or it butts up against Christian belief, they lie and they say it won't affect the Christians. And then ultimately Christians are either fined into bankruptcy or threatened with jail. So C-9 will be no different.
Yeah. That's, terrible news, not great news. Tell us, is there good news? Tell us the good news in all of this.
I shouldn't be, my kids tell me, Dad, stop black pilling. But let me say this. This is not a black pill, Greg. This is a white pill. Ultimately, the norms and values of Christianity, they do win because they're the only things that will hold society together. And they're the only thing that provides maximum freedom with maximum common good. So you can have other systems where the society won't fall apart, but it's very authoritarian. And you can have another system where there's total freedom, but you've got people pooping on the streets, you've got drug addicts in your children's playgrounds. So ultimately, if you want to have a society that is maximum freedom with maximum common good, there's only one choice. And I prove it in my book. I go into great depths. I bring the receipts. It's almost 600 pages, and it proves that it truly is Christ or collapse.
Thank you so much for being on the show. And it really sounds like a great resource as well. It sounds like a great resource of all the different examples of why, Christianity is, dare I use the word, superior in terms of how to operate a, society. And I mean, I was kidding before, like, oh, the bad news. I was hoping you would say all this stuff because that's kind of what I believe too.
Right.
But you know, you got a book here. You live in Canada. You're daring to make a value judgment between different cultures and ideology. Now, that is not necessarily detestation and vilification. However, some people's feelings might get upset, and they might try to make that argument. Do you think you're going to be arrested for publishing this book or talking about this book in public?
I don't know. We don't know because it is tonight at midnight that C-9 comes in full force. And we've seen this slow erosion of the rights of Christians. I go in chapter 4 and 5, maybe it's chapter 3 anyway. I go through all the court cases that show that the rights of Christians have been systematically eliminated for the last 20 years. Christians have not won a court case where their beliefs were pitted against LGBT people, for example. But in the Whatcott decision, so William Whatcott was charged with hate speech, and his case went all the way to the Supreme Court. Now, I mention that because in that case, it was decided that even though he was providing research citations and was truthfully giving the data, the justices of our Supreme Court said that truth is no longer a defense. It was more important that he had offended. So back to your question, is the book that I've just written and published going to end up seeing me in court? Here's what we do know. Christians don't have the same rights as others in Canada any longer. We know now that truth is not a defense. We know now, because of C-9, that you cannot quote scripture if it offends people. So on the balance of those criteria, I'd say there's a really good chance that I could face some trouble. But here's the other thing. This is exactly what Christians should expect. I am of the belief now, and this is coming out of COVID, of course, that your faith should be expensive. And if you're not being persecuted, you're probably doing it wrong, because there are many things in this society that must change. And so if Christians are called to be salt, which is to preserve society, and light, which is to expose the dirt of society, there's so much rot and there's so much dirt. If you're not being persecuted, it means you're not speaking. So I think there's going to be a lot of trouble to the extent that Christians are actually faithful.
Right. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show. Someone just came into the studio. Did you want to hang around and chat for a little bit? Are you still good to hang around for a bit, David?
Only to say that we have a hero here on the screen. Can he hear me at this point?
Yes, he can. Okay, we'll get him on right now. But just to kind of wrap this up, David Millard Haskell's books, Christ or Collapse, The Case Against Godless Government. Great to see it. Love to see it. I definitely want to pick this book up. It's a good resource at the very least. And yes, who just arrived is the one and only Artur Pawlowski. You're really giving a great introduction, talking about, now we know Christians are going to be persecuted. But I mean, this guy, I think 2007 was his first charge. We're going to bring on Artur Pawlowski. It's going to be a little sloppy. Let me do the tech here, but let's bring him on here. Just give us a sec. And what? And just give it a sec here. Artur, can we hear you? How are you?
Hello. Hey, good to see you again. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. David, can you hear Artur?
I can. And Artur, I don't want to sort of take away from what you're going to be talking about. Just wanted to say, I think this is the first time we've even met virtually. We've probably been at some similar functions together, but like many Canadians, thank you for your bravery. And as a Christian, I say thank you very much for showing a model that needs to be emulated by far more pastors. So with that, I'm probably going to head out, Greg, and I'll just let you carry on your conversation.
Thank you so much, Dave. Thank you.
Awesome, fantastic. Thanks so much for coming on, David. And yeah, if you're getting charged, we'll be there to cover it. But
right on. Bye-bye.
See ya. All right. So, how are you doing, Artur?
Good. How are you?
I'm good. Just going to do a quick little switcheroo here. Let's do this. Just got to do some tech stuff here. Oh, boy. You know what? One sec. We're going to do it this way. One second. I was hoping to make this transition really smooth. Didn't happen the way I wanted. Just get StreamYard. Don't worry. We'll do it. We're gonna do it this way. It's fine. And I think that is all right. Awesome. So, thank you so much for coming on short notice, Artur Pawlowski. Tomorrow, Bill C-9 comes into effect. You've already been charged multiple times for also including reading the Bible. I think it was in 2007 at Tom King's park in Calgary.
No, it was actually 2005, believe it or not, where the police officers, Bylaw Services, communicated with me about all those different laws. Can you still hear me?
I can, but there's an echo. Hold on. Oh boy. Let's get rid of this. Hopefully that's it. Speak now.
How about now?
Oh, there's an echo. I'm guessing you guys can hear that echo. Maybe it's here. Let's get rid of this. Hopefully that's it. All right. How about now?
Testing 1, 2, 3, 4.
Yes. Okay, it's gone. Thank goodness. Sorry about that.
Okay. So going back to the timeline, it was 2005 where the Bylaw Services and police officers communicated with me and our church that, are you ready? Feeding the poor is actually illegal in Canada. Preaching the gospel, it's illegal in Canada. The name of Jesus is offensive, illegal. Our Bibles, distribution of our Bibles, gospel tracts, illegal. 2005. Again, I'm talking about 2005. And congregating, also illegal, unless you have a special permit from the mayor or the parks department or some other bureaucratic departments where they will graciously give you permission to do what is protected by the Charter of Rights and Freedoms and, of course, our Constitution. So, Bill of Rights. 2005, 2006, I was arrested by 7 police officers for reading the Bible. No amplification system. To 6 parishioners, 100 feet away from another human being, to ourselves. And the police showed up and said, we're no longer allowed to read the Bible, and I have to vacate the park or I will be arrested. So ultimately, I quoted, and I guess he took an offense to that, the Charter of Rights and Freedoms and the Constitution. I told him he is mistaken, that I, in fact, have a right to read from the Bible. He disagreed, and I was arrested and charged criminally. He put 7 criminal charges on me, forced me to walk backwards. I ended up in jail facing, I think it was 6 to a year of imprisonment for my crime. But why am I telling you this? Because I want to read a quote to you. And it's quite interesting because I read that quote to my fellow pastors and clergy during that time. The case was widely covered by the mainstream media. At that time, the mainstream media was not as wicked and evil as they are today. There was actually some fair reporting. Alicia Corbella covered the story. She was from Calgary Sun. She was the editor in chief. She did actually a very fair covering, and other outlets as well. Bobrovitz, he was from Global Television. He did an amazing story, kind of telling my side of the story and telling the city's side of the story, which is fair. That's how reporting was supposed to be all about, and people in the middle, choosing the side, choosing who's right, who's wrong. I mean, that's how it used to be. If we're talking about reporting, that's of course is completely gone. There's no such a thing as investigative reporting, fair reporting. It's all biased. It's all left. Those people are losing their marbles every single day. And I don't know if you heard about the latest news from Calgary. Some stations are actually shutting down because no one wants to listen to their crap, to their garbage, to their propaganda, because that's what it is. In the end of the day, you cannot rely on the mainstream media because they are just simply propaganda pieces. And again, you got to remember, I grew up under that environment behind the Iron Curtain. So, you should listen or pay attention to a man that grew up under propaganda that is telling you, Greg, mainstream media is propaganda. Okay, you should pay attention to people like us. But let's go back to the story of 2005 and 2006. I remember I had multiple meetings with my colleagues, and I was all over the news. I mean, every second evening news, I was there, and I warned the people. And here's what I used as a quote. First, they came for the socialists, and I did not speak out because I was not a socialist. Then they came for the trade unionists, and I did not speak out because I was not a trade unionist. Then they came for the Jews, and I did not speak out because I was not a Jew. Then they came for me, and there was no one left to speak for me. Of course, the quote, this famous quote, is from a pastor, Martin Niemöller, and he was a prominent Lutheran pastor in Germany. And in the 20s, for the people that do not know who this pastor was, in the 20s, he actually sympathized with the Nazi ideas and supported the radically right-wing political movements. But when Adolf Hitler got power in 1933, he realized how corrupt the system is, how wicked Hitler is, and of course the interference in the Protestant church that Adolf Hitler with his Nazi party unleashed. And his story kind of goes on. He opposes the Nazi regime. He stands against fascism and Adolf Hitler and his dictatorship and his tyranny. And he spent the last 8 years of the Nazi rule from 1937 to 1945 in the Nazi prisons and concentration camps. And, as a kicker for those people that do not know, do you know how many laws, so-called laws, of course, in quote, the Nazi regime implemented from 1933? So from the moment Adolf Hitler gets his power, of course, he cheated. He got it by force. He was selected, just like our politicians right now, to become the chancellor of Germany by force. He did not allow other members of the Reichstag to vote because he arrested them. I mean, it's a crazy, insane story. I love to teach that story. I did even a series of exposés, if you will. I'm calling them. Let me just put it there. The story, the law, the judicial system, if you will, that has been unleashed on the people. And I'm going through all kinds of different stories and how he got to power, what he did. And I mean, it's a fascinating a fascinating history, but I think we have not learned anything, Greg, from that history. So we are witnessing a repetition in front of our very eyes. But for those people that do not know, from 1933, where Adolf Hitler just took power democratically, in quote, by arresting his opposition and not allowing other members to vote, so he got elected. Okay, just like Carnage, I call him Carnage. Carney was selected to destroy, to finish Canada off. You know how many laws were implemented, enacted? The Bill C-9 types of laws against the Jewish people. Do you know?
How many?
Well, normally when I ask that question and people do not know the answer, they would say 50, 100, 200. But the truth is that from 1933 to 1939, so just 6 years, within the 6 years window before Adolf Hitler attacks Poland and makes a hell on the rest of the world, he implemented over 2,000 laws, so-called laws against them, against the Jewish people. Insanity. Why am I teaching this? Why am I saying about those things? Because tyrants, dictators always operate the same way. Their modus operandi is always identical. They always bring laws, bylaws, bills to oppress their own people, to control their own people. So when we start talking about the bills and the bylaws, to this day, and I shared this story, Greg, hundreds of times, maybe thousands of times already since 2005, probably thousands of times. To this day, Canadians, most of them, do not know that there are actual laws in the books that are penalizing you to feed the poor. So if you are walking the streets and you see a dying child out of starvation and you have a sandwich, and if you dare to share that sandwich with the dying child, you may end up in prison, because there is an law.
If you're white and Christian. Because I'm sure there's plenty of Sikh organizations that can do this and they wouldn't get any trouble at all. In fact, they would probably be featured on CBC as being, a good Samaritan, and look how helpful, these Sikhs wearing turbans are.
Yeah.
I think the unique thing is that you're not just feeding the homeless, but you're also a known, proud, God-fearing Christian who also preaches the gospel and is getting people off the streets and kind of making our government institutions look bad, in terms of our homeless shelters look bad or our soup kitchens look bad, because you're doing their job for them just as a strong, proud Christian, right?
Yeah, and to prove your point, remember the Occupied Wall Street or Occupied Calgary, Occupied Toronto movement? Sure. Well, they would storm City Hall. Literally, they would move into the City Hall, into the public property, and do their chanting and do their whatever they were doing, the crazy people. And we wanted to test the law and said, okay, if the Occupied Calgary can do whatever they want to do outside of the chambers in public, exercising their rights, let's see if a bunch of Christians, if we will go over there and just pray, let's see what happens. I mean, here you've got wackos that are occupying the public space, breaking all kinds of laws, and let's see if Christians will just go there peacefully and pray. Let's see what happened. Well, I'm sure you can guess what happened. We got arrested. I got arrested with our parishioners and taken in handcuffs outside of the City Hall. It was a big story. And of course, we were painted as a lawbreakers and disruptors. And again, you got to remember, our crime, in quote, was prayer. And if I would tell you there is actual laws passed by our so-called representatives that are stating that if you give a business card, so forget about Bibles for a second, forget about gospel tracts. If I would tell you that there is a law in the books that if you share your information, your business card, your pamphlet, whatever you have about your business or about whatever with another human being in public, you just broke the law, you would say, Art, you're crazy. I don't believe you. And that's the problem with Canadians. You're telling them the law, you're telling them what those people are passing, how crazy, insane, psychopathic those aldermen, those mayors, those premiers, members of legislative assembly or members of parliament are. Most people would choose not to believe it. And recently, because of the bill C-9, I have been approached by a number of pastors and different civil rights organizations, and people were contacting me and sending me stuff like, I didn't know what's going on. And they said, aren't you concerned that this is passing? It's like, no, I'm actually not concerned at this moment because I have been already arrested. I have been already charged over 360 times by our wonderful government. I was forced to go to over 120 court cases. I have been imprisoned by this system. I have been tortured by this system. I have been kept in metal cages by this system. I was found guilty of terrorism for giving people message of hope, where I said to the Canadians, peaceful, no guns, no swords, keeping the peace, and telling them that God is bigger than the wannabe Pharaohs. I was charged with terrorism under some crazy law, interfering with the crucial infrastructure under the defense, law. And I was found guilty by this crooked judge, Gordon Krinke, and convicted. He told me he can send me to prison for 12 and a half years for telling people to stay peacefully and to give them a message of hope. So my answer to the clergy and the pastors, Greg, and then I'll give you the floor, is they have already damaged me. They have already penalized me so many times that my lawyers don't remember. I was already arrested. My brother, they went after my family, the church. They lit my house on fire. They unscrewed tires in our pickup truck, trying to assassinate me and my children and my wife. I had Antifa in my property. They vandalized our church for months and months. They lit our church on fire. And I don't know if you know, Greg, but our ex-prime minister, the son of the Castro, just was dancing with his girlfriend at a music, a song, Burn Down the Churches. I don't know if you heard about this. That just came out yesterday. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau Castro was dancing to the tunes and the words of a song, Burn Down the Churches. Let's just burn down all the churches. And that's not inciting hatred, according to our government. That's perfectly fine because he is on the, are you ready, on the right side of politics. If you're on the right side of politics, you can get away pretty much with anything you want. And again, if you don't believe me, look what Black Lives Matter did during COVID. I was arrested. I was charged. They went after my family. My brother was arrested 13 times. Our kid was detained over 20 times. And Black Lives Matter had 5,000 people marching through the streets, no social distancing. Most of them were not wearing a muzzle. And the police officers took the knee in homage to those crazy psychopathic individuals. So, one law for me, one law for thee. That's the system we have right now in Canada. You can have a dagger with you, and that's your religious right, and you can walk with a sword literally anywhere you want. But if you have a Bible in the wrong place, if you quote the Bible in the wrong place, if God forbids you offend some psycho out there, you can be criminally charged. Right now, you can be charged criminally for offending the feelings of the pedophiles and the groomers of children. And again, if you don't believe me, talk to Pastor Derek Reimer. He was arrested and imprisoned because he dared to expose the pedophilia and the grooming of the children in public libraries. The grooming sessions, adults playing dress up with children and toddlers, is paid by taxpayers' money. And Derek Reimer dared to say peacefully, not even yelling and screaming like Artur Pawlowski, peacefully, that this is wrong, and he's not okay with that. And he was arrested and charged criminally for I think the charges they levied against him was criminal harassment. The guy talked to a person, to a manager in a library once in his life. Once. And they call this criminal harassment. This is what we are facing right now.
Yeah, the clip is quite alarming. He goes up, "Hey, did you book a the Drag Queens for Kids event here?" And it's at a library, public library. And it's he's pretty calm the whole time, but this is what's asking somebody a simple question like this gets called criminal harassment. And thank you for
still, Greg is still in court. This is now 4 years in the making. And remember there is this famous saying since the COVID craziness that the process is the punishment. So even they have nothing on you. Even if you're completely innocent, just like David just said, the truth is no defense. I mean, it doesn't matter if you're right, if you're speaking the truth, if you have offended a mentally challenged person or a pedophile or a groomer of children or a crazy wacko that marches on the streets naked, like we see in Ontario, protected by the law enforcement agencies, naked, which is a criminal offense, indecent exposure. And if you say this is wrong, children are around here, they should not be subjected to this grooming, this sexual perversion, while you can end up with a criminal charge. So my answer to those clergy and to those pastors is, no, I'm not concerned anymore, because they have done everything to Artur Pawlowski. They can do the same thing again, but when once you went through the ringer, it's just another round. But I say to them, you should be concerned about this. Why? Because if you have never been trained, if you have never been subjected to the level of cruelty that they have unleashed on me and others, and you have never tasted it, you should be very concerned, because it's not pretty. It's not nice. And and you've covered this, Greg. I wrote the book in prison, Lions Do Not Bow. But why? Not only to tell the story, but also to give you history, to give you the remedy to our problems. So the book is not poor me, look what they've done to me. They kept me in metal cages, in psych wards, and without the evaluation of doctors, in max spot for terrorists, and solitary confinement, and concrete cells, no water, no washroom. Yeah, that's a crazy story. But what I wanted the people to know not only the bad, but what is the remedy, how we can fix this. So I really encourage you to get it. It's Amazon.com, Lions Do Not Bow, or Amazon.ca, Lions Do Not Bow. So going back to our story.
Can I have the floor? You said you were going to give me the floor. And
Yes,
you
go ahead.
keep going, and I love everything that you're sharing. I appreciate it, but I do want to get into some questions here to kind of unearth some stuff. First of all, thank you for laying all that out. You mentioned 20 years ago, you were getting arrested already, basically as a Christian, just reading the Bible, not even with amplification. First question. Were you when you were reading the Bible, was it something that was like inflammatory and homophobic, or at least like certain parts of the Bible that are like, hey, man can't lay with another man? Like, was it even the homophobic verses, or were you simply just reading Psalms?
Actually, you nailed it. I was reading Psalms. That's it.
So
That was the
not even the more like homophobic things that could be considered like anti-woke parts of the Bible. Just
No.
they really just
No, the words and what I was reading was irrelevant to the police. They were not even asking me what I was reading. I was reading Psalms, but they didn't care. They told me that the Bible is offensive, that I have to stop reading the Bible because the Bible is offensive. And I remember having meeting with the pastors, and I said, aren't you come to my aid? I mean, one of your own is facing this craziness. Aren't you not going to scream and yell everywhere that your rights are being infringed on? And the answer, most of them said, it's probably you did something. It's probably you. No other people are facing these problems as you. You're
Really?
the problem. And most of the people to this day, I mean, not so much now, because everything I have been saying, Greg, is coming to fruition. Everything, all the warnings I was giving for the past 20 some years, we can see it, the writing on the wall right now. But even 5, 6, 7 years ago, I had clergy telling me, it's you. You are the trouble. You are causing this problem with authorities. We don't have this problem. And Greg, and that's true. If you are, just like David said, your guest before me, if you're not speaking, if you're not rocking the boat, in quote, if you're not pushing the envelope, if you're not preaching the whole Bible from the Genesis to Revelation, I would say to you, you don't have to fear anything, because during the Nazi era, even during the communist era, there were churches out there, but they were infiltrated and they were controlled by the government. So the pastors and the priests were only allowed to preach what the government was allowing them to preach. And as long as they did it, they were good puppies, good dogs on a leash and muzzled. The government had no issues with them. But the moment you preach the whole truth and nothing but the truth, you're going to end up in hot waters.
Yeah. And to relate to what something else David said related to what you're talking about is, it's going to cost you something. Actually having these beliefs, especially now in 2026 with C-9 coming into effect tonight at midnight, it's going to cost you something to actually be a Christian, which means, trying to carry the word and actually be, uphold your beliefs. And I was actually going to ask that question, which was, is there almost a little bit of resentment towards these other clergymen where now that C-9 is coming, they're like, whoa, we're kind of worried, Artur. And it's like, well, where were you before, man? Were these clergymen, were these other pastors and preachers standing up for you when you were getting uniquely persecuted like this? Where were they then?
Yeah, but we cannot render evil for evil. My point is not looking at this and says, now good, you're going to face difficulty yourself. No, because I love this country too much. I have 3 children, and we are fighting not just for ourselves, we're fighting for the future of their children, not just our children. So no, my point is very simple. When there was a time to stand up and fight this evil, you were nowhere to be found. Now the evil has come for you as well. And this is your like a second opportunity right now to do the right thing, to stand up for God, to stand up for the truth. You didn't do it before. Now you're in hot water, you're in trouble, and your children and your congregants and your colleagues are in trouble right now. So I pray and I hope you will do the right thing and you will stand up. It's like during the COVID era, 99.99999% of the clergy didn't stand up. They proved to the whole world they are cowards. They don't believe in the Bible. They are picking and choosing what works for them. They have decided to be pastors for comfort. They have decided to be clergy for entertainment, not for the real reasons. But the Bible is very clear that when you preach the truth, 2 Timothy 3:12, 2 Timothy 3:12 to 13, it says, indeed, all who desire, all, that means, you know what that means? That means all who desire to live godly lives in Christ Jesus will be persecuted. So my question to my colleagues and other Christians would be, if you have not been persecuted, why not? If you never faced a backlash, a persecution, an authority at your door, perhaps it is because you have not become a threat to the kingdom of Satan. In other words, he looks at you, Greg, and says, I'm not going to waste my resources on this guy because he is a coward. So I already got him where I want him. He's a muzzled dog on a leash. Why would I spend my time on a guy that I already got? But if you're the real deal, you're preaching the truth, the Bible, here's what Jesus is saying, right, in his word. Apostle writes, by the power of the Holy Spirit, by the revelation from God, that when you live a righteous life, godly life, when you preach the truth that has the power to set the captives free, you will be persecuted, while evil men and impostors go from bad to worse, deceiving and being deceived. Why? Because Jesus' words from John 14:6, I am the way and the truth and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. So when you start preaching the truth, the whole truth and nothing but the truth, you will be attacked. And there is, Greg, no avoiding it. The whole Bible from the very beginning to the very end, it just proves us with all those countless witnesses that when you stand for the truth, when you preach the truth, the enemy will show up to test your mental. Are you serious? Are you actually preaching the truth? Are you committed? Are you willing to pay the price? Like David said, there is a price attached to preaching the truth. Actually, I would go further. I would say to you that if it cost the father the life of his son and it cost the son his own blood, his own life, you really think that it's not going to cost you anything? I would say to you, Greg, it will cost you everything to be a follower of Christ. So in summary, if you have not been
I love this. I'm still like a newer Christian. Actually, Artur baptized me, but this is the one concept that I love to kind of continue to meditate and reflect on. This whole, you have to, crucify your own flesh. You have to crucify your own life. You have to kind of give up on your own will, to start living by God's will. And that's only when your actual potential and fulfillment can really start. But I did want to say another thing that you could probably play off of. David, before you showed up, he talked about how, certain theologians said that you got to be a slave. You're going to be a slave to something. You should be a slave for God. You should be a slave to his will and to his kind of what he wants for you.
But that's actually a wrong interpretation, and it's a very bad theology. Apostle Paul writes, and he says about being a bond servant. So when you come, Greg, to Jesus, when you come to God, you come as a slave. You're a slave to sin. You're a slave to impure thoughts. You're a slave to all kinds of evil. But when you come to Jesus, it's very clear. He says, who comes to me is free indeed. When you come to Jesus, he sets you free. So every day you come back to God, and the first thing he does is setting you free. So you're not replacing one slave master with another slave master. That's completely wrong theology, because the word of God, the truth will set you free. Jesus says, I no longer call you my servants. That's Jesus' words. I no longer call you my servants. I call you my friends. We are friends of God. We're family of God. And, I got 3 children, as you know, and it's an impossible thing. Impossible. If you truly love your children, it's an impossibility to turn your children into slaves, because everything I do is to support them and to make their lives better, for them to succeed, for them to achieve more than I ever could. And the same with Father, which is in heaven. When he looks at you, Greg, he's not seeing you as another slave that is to serve him. He sees you as a son. And every father, if it's a true father with a true love, sets their children free. So if you have financial difficulties, the father will come to your aid. If you have healing problems, health problems, if you got house problems, whatever, car problems, a good father comes to the aid of his children. In other words, a real father with a real love sets you free. So we're no longer slaves. We are no longer servants. We can serve God, like I'm serving people at the table. When I have visitors coming for dinner, I serve them, but I'm not their servant. I do serve them, but I'm not their servant. I'm their brother. I'm their family member. I'm their friend. So I wanted to clarify this, that when you come to Jesus, he sets you free, and you're free indeed. That's the word of God.
Yeah. And you bring up a good point, and I think that maybe when he was using the term slave, it was more kind of like to make it a broad, general thing so people can kind of understand, like you said, the difference between serving and servant. It is pretty close in a lot of people's minds, but it is important to clarify that, because it's not, it wouldn't be it's right. It wouldn't be the true definition of a slave to God. It would be much more of being obedient to what he wants. But let's talk a little bit about, because you keep up you bring up World War II a couple times. World War II, the prosecution of Jews and Christians. But as you mentioned, you brought up Timothy 2 Timothy 3-12. Anybody who wants to live a godly life will be persecuted. And it goes back way further than just World War II, right? It's a much more kind of intense ongoing thing. A lot of people, I think, fail to kind of see that we're living through history right now. And isn't it funny that you've predicted all of these things? You were right, but people still think you're crazy. Isn't that annoying? But
well, Greg, it can be. But I have this friend. He is in a business for his life, and I remember I attended one of his speaking, conferences, and I'll never forget it because it hit me. It kind of opened my eyes. He said, when you lead, so when you're in a position of any leadership, it doesn't matter where you turn, your behind is always exposed. So when you're leading, you're vulnerable. You're vulnerable. They will be gossiping about you. They will be slandering you. They will be lying. They will be attacking you. They will try to discourage you. Ultimately, Satan will try to force you to quit. So you have become a threat to his kingdom. So he's doing everything. And unfortunately, he's using people to attack you. And they have their own agendas and they have their own reasonings why they're doing this to you. But ultimately, a house divided cannot succeed, cannot stand. And I would say to you that Satan is a very clever opponent, and he knows the game of divide and conquer. And we're seeing this in the MAGA movement right now. We're seeing this in the freedom movement in Alberta. I mean, everyone is at each other's throat. and the people that should be united against the globalist demons, psychopaths that want us dead and our children dead, what do? We criticize each other. We attack each other. We go after each other. Why? Because we think or we see things a little bit differently than others. I say that quite often, Greg. I disagree with my wife from time to time about certain things, but that doesn't mean I hate her, or I disagree with my father or with my brother or with my children. There will come a time where we will see things a little bit differently, but that's not a moment in our lives to destroy each other. This is the moment to show true love. And there is this verse in the Bible, which I absolutely love, that a true love, a real love covers multitudes of sins. So what that means is that my love should be stronger, should be bigger than your shortcomings. When I truly love you, I will see your shortcomings and they will not be that big of a deal, because I will cover your shortcomings with my love. I'll talk to you, I'll educate you, I will come alongside of you, I will try everything to assist you so you can become better. But I don't see that in Christianity right now. What I see is everyone is tearing each other apart, and they are doing it publicly. Look what is happening within the Freedom Convoy movement. Even in Alberta, the leadership is at each other's throats. I'm not going to name names, but this person is talking wicked things about this person. Then this person retaliates and does videos about that person. And it's a never-ending craziness. And that's exactly what Satan wants. Because in the end of the day, there's this famous saying, Greg, Islam doesn't care where you go to church. They don't care if you're Catholic. They don't care if you're Protestant. They don't care if you're Baptist or Lutheran, Pentecostal. They don't care. To them, you are an infidel, and they want you dead. They want to chop your head off, right? So the globalists don't care about people in Canada. What they want is they want to control and destroy everyone. Everyone. That's why they're attacking children, they're attacking women, men, young, old, elderly, a maid, over 100,000 slaughtered Canadians, economy is collapsing. They do not discriminate. They want you dead and they want your children dead. So my message would be, let's agree to disagree. It's not a big of a deal to see things a little bit differently, as long as we can agree on this. Freedom for you to make your own choice. And that freedom is a jeopardy. They're attacking our freedoms. And if we're not careful, if we will not come together in unity, we will be swallowed, eaten by the big fish, while we are focusing on the little skirmish with the small fish.
Yeah. You bring up a lot of good points, but I am kind of wary of some of this let's not be too divisive thing. I agree, like the one verse, 1 Corinthians 13:4-8, I'll bring it on screen here. Love is patient, love is kind, it does not envy, it does not boast, it is not proud, it does not dishonor others, it is not self-seeking, it is not easily angered, it keeps no record of wrongs. Love does not delight in evil, but rejoices with the truth. It always protects, always trusts, always hopes, always perseveres. Now, I love that. When it comes to, like, let's not be divisive, how do we square this circle with the Conservative Party of Canada and characters like Danielle Smith and Pierre Poilievre? I want to bring up another verse, which is we need to Matthew 10:16. Behold, I send you forth as sheep in the midst of wolves. Be ye therefore wise as serpents and harmless as doves. We need to be smart here. And a friend of mine said this years ago, but I think it's continually true, which is everything in Canadian politics is controlled. So much of it is controlled. We don't know. I don't like to feed conspiracy theories, But, a lot of the time, people even among us who are pretending to be these freedom fighters might be an operative from a political party, might be, working for this agenda or that agenda. And so we do have to be discerning when kind of navigating these waters to make sure that we can actually put up an opposition to what's happening in Parliament. As I'm sure you would agree, I really don't think Poilievre and some of these establishment conservatives are doing a good job at any of that. I mean, really, were they standing up for you? Were they standing up for Christians? Like, you don't see it. They're still afraid to say anything of any consequence. And so in terms of drawing a line and being divisive with fake conservatives, like, I'm sorry, I'm definitely going to be drawing that line and, trying to push people to step over it.
Yeah, that's not what I was talking about. I was talking about among the family and friends. Let's not divide. But if you are seeing a clear enemy of moral standards or the truth. So, for example, why I went heavy on Daniel Smith or on Pierre Poilievre, because he goes out of his way and publicly states that his government is going to keep slaughtering babies. And he did it publicly. So when I hear, as a man of God, as a pastor, as a Christian, when I hear you or anybody else saying, yeah, elect me and I promise you I'll keep slaughtering children. Please elect me. I have to, Greg, draw a line here and say, you're a psycho, man. You're a bloody murderer. I'm not going to support a man that publicly is not ashamed, even is not hiding that he wants to keep killing babies. And if it comes to the premier, when I see a flip-flopping politician, and we just had a stampede, which is kind of beautiful to watch. Well, all those fake politicians are flip-flopping, flopping the pancakes and so happy about it.
It's an analogy.
On camera.
It's
right?
It's a dog whistle. Yeah.
That's what they do. They're flip-flopping. They're flopping the pancakes, and they're useless because they're flip-flopping. Today, they are for you. Tomorrow, they are for your enemy. You cannot trust them. So when you see flip-flopping politicians, when you see liars, professional liars, telling you one thing today and completely different story tomorrow, well, you have a choice. You have to draw a line. Do I want to support a person like this? And hey, they can change. And I hope and I pray that they would change. So let's say Pierre Poilievre comes publicly and says, okay, I was wrong. I was not a conservative. Now I realize that I want to become a conservative politician, and I'm going to bring conservatism to the Conservative Party. I can live with that. I would support that kind of a movement. If Daniel Smith would come and say, okay, I was wrong. I promised certain things. I never delivered them, but now I'm going to make things right. I would sit down with those people and I would support their efforts, because every man can make a mistake. I've made mistakes. You've made mistakes. People make mistakes. That's why we need a savior. We need Jesus, because we're imperfect sinners saved by grace and grace alone. But I don't see that. I see flip-flopping all the time. So they're no longer conservatives. That's where you need to draw a line and ask yourself this very simple question. Will my God be fine with me voting for a party that wants to slaughter children? Will God be okay with me giving my money and my support to the Conservative Party that vows to slaughter as many children as possible? Will God be okay with that? So that's, every individual has to make that their own choice. But going back to the laws, the Bill C and other laws, Bill C-9 and other laws that are being unleashed against Christians here, here is what Roman historian Tacitus said. He said, the more corrupt the state, the more numerous the laws. I mean, think about this. The more corrupt the state, the more numerous the laws. Greg, right now, I spend so much time with lawyers and in the court proceedings, not just for me, but through the COVID and the, Coots 4, Coots Trio, and Pat King, and Tamara Leach, and Barber, you name it. I have listened to the proceedings and read what was said, what was happening. And I'm telling you, you've got in this country a huge problem, because even the lawyers and the judges no longer are capable of truthfully determine what that law is all about. I heard judges on the bench having no clue what this is all about. And I saw lawyers with the judge arguing back and forth, saying, I don't understand myself. It's not clear. So when you have a society, when you have so-called justice system that has law on top of law on top of law, and even the experts that go to university for that have no clue what this whole thing is all about, you already have a tyranny. The Roman statesman Cicero, I'm sure you're familiar with that guy, he famously observed a related concept. He said, the strictest law is the greatest injustice. In other words, we can summarize all of this with more laws, less justice. So they're bringing all those laws left and right. But let me ask you, an average Canadian. I want to speak to the average Canadian right now. Are you safer right now in your municipalities, in your provinces, than you were 40, 50 years ago? Think about it. Are you safer? All those laws, we got law on top of law. They're piling laws left and right. Are you safer? Because I tell you, Canadians to this day come to me and they say, 40, 50 years ago, you didn't have to lock your car. In rural Alberta and other provinces as well, I was told in Ontario, out of all the crazy places, I was told by people living in Ontario that 40, 50, 60 years ago, they did not even lock their homes. Mm-hmm. They didn't have to lock their homes in rural municipalities. So you've got all those tens of thousands of new laws being added all the time, and we are living in hell. Calgary, you got shootings almost every day. You've got people dying almost every single day. When I moved to Calgary, Alberta, in 95, we had one homicide, one, sometimes two a year. That's all. And it was a big story, big deal. Now we have almost every single day people dying.
Wow.
Why? Because we walked away from God of life. We replaced God of life with God of death, with the small g, with idol, Satan, a bloody murderer. He comes to steal, kill, and destroy. And that's exactly Canada of today. So tyrants always bring more laws.
Yes.
To keep their power, to keep their control.
Now, let's get a little bit into some of the details on your own court proceedings or personal life. First and foremost, I know that clergymen, you said priests and pastors have maybe come to you worried about Bill C-9. Hey, Artur, do you have a lawyer? But have you been having any conversations with lawyers knowing that C-9 is going to come into effect tonight at midnight? Are you doing anything to prepare for this?
No, I will keep, no matter what, I'll keep preaching the whole Bible from the beginning to the very end. I have absolutely zero intention of stopping from preaching the whole Bible, everything, whatever it's in the Bible. Homosexuality is an abomination. You got a problem with that? Talk to the boss. I did not write the Bible. You have a problem with the Bible? Look at the Quran. In Quran, they are commanded to throw homosexuals off the rooftops. So you want to go after the entire Islamic State? Are you going after imams? Are you going after Muslims? Good luck. See how that goes for you. So there are a number of religions, number of organizations that openly advocate in their words, in their religion, violence against other people. We Christians, we may disagree with people's lifestyles. So, for example, I disagree with the lifestyle of a prostitute. I will encourage the prostitute to stop selling her body to people. I disagree with drunkards, drug addicts, drug dealers, pedophiles, thieves, murderers, people that have bitterness, unforgiveness, hatred in their hearts. And I'll preach the truth to them. And I'll say, this is not a good lifestyle. Transgenderism, look at the statistics. It's not a good lifestyle. It's proven by doctors, biology, you name it. It's not. So stop doing whatever it's harming you. Stop doing it, because I cancel homosexuals. I counsel people with same sex attraction, and they're not happy people. 50% of the transgender commit suicide. Why do you think is that? Why they're being driven into killing themselves if whatever they were waiting for is so good for them? So the truth is the truth, Greg. The governments come and go. Tyrants come and go. Where are the pharaohs today? Where are the Babylonians, Persians, Romans, Ottoman Empire? Where is Joseph Stalin? Where is Adolf Hitler? Where is Mao Zedong? Those people come and go, and everyone will stand before the living God, the judge of judges. We are called to stand with the truth. And, I want to read something to you because I think you will be blessed. I just did a teaching on that life, on that man, on Socrates. He was charged with insanity as well. At the age of 70, they charged him with asebia, which is not acknowledging city gods and introducing new ones, and also moral corruption. So they charged him with moral corruption, corrupting the youth. Why? Because he dared to preach the truth to the youngsters. He told them the truth, and the government didn't like it, so they took him to court. But
specifically, what was the truth that Socrates was preaching when he was 70?
Well, he said that those gods are not real gods. They're made up stuff, and the people should think for themselves and not to follow blindly, some idols. And
so it was a form of blaspheming these other kind of false idols or false gods.
Yeah. And, and the thing is, that's the same thing we're watching right now in Canada. If you find yourself on the wrong side of the issue, the one that is not approved by the state, you might not be allowed to.
If you're not worshiping the rainbow flag, then
right. If you're not worshiping, COVID shots, you will not be able to go to a restaurant, hockey game, or work. Or you will not be able to study. Like my son, Nathaniel, he was blacklisted by the Canadian government, not allowed to study in Canada, just like during communism and fascism era. Censorship, right? Of course. And, when I preached a few weeks ago about this story, I asked the people why we should pay attention to the trial of Socrates. Here's why. Because as we speak, our society is moving towards that kind of a totalitarian regime. Like I said, you got Bill C-9, you got Bill C-34, Bill C-2, and those are just little, steps towards dictatorship that they are unleashing on all of us. And Amos 5:10 says there are those who hate the one who upholds justice in court. So you will have, when a totalitarian regime, when the wannabe pharaohs are in power, they will absolutely hate. That's why Nathaniel was not allowed to study here to become a lawyer, because those people, they hate those that want to uphold justice in a court. In other words, keep them accountable. But let's go to Socrates, and he was asked by the judges. Of course, I say that loosely. The so-called judges. He was asked this: Are you ready, Greg? It's so amazing, and I see this throughout the history. He said they ask him, "We can forgive you. We can forgive you if you stop speaking completely." Is that not what we are heading into? They want to muzzle the pastors. They want to muzzle Christians. They want to tell us that there are certain things you cannot talk about. And that's, of course, that's not democracy. So turn this country into dictatorship, call it a dictatorship. Don't play this game of we're living in a free and democratic society, the free, strong, northern free, because that's not the case. It's a big fat lie. But the answer of Socrates was unbelievable. And it will be remembered forever by all those who in some way are interested in the truth. He said, I'm living only to speak. I'm living only to speak the truth. Life was given to me by existence to experience truth. And now I'm repaying life by spreading the truth to those who are groping in the dark. If I cannot speak, then I don't see any point. Why should I live? My life and my message of truth are synonymous. Please don't try to seduce me. If I am alive, I will speak. And then the judges were at loss. One of the judges said, are you ready, Greg? It's so fascinating, the story. You're too stubborn, Socrates. And I have been called stubborn, Greg, by many people, troublemaker, lawbreaker, stubborn. But here is what he said. And of course, when you taste the truth, you will not want to let it go. Truth liberates a man like nothing else. When you start leaving, when you start leaving, why would you go back to the land of the dead? Here is what he replied. Socrates said, it is not I who is stubborn. It is the truth. It is virtue which is stubborn. Truth knows no compromise. Fascinating. Truth knows no compromise. It is better to die than to be condemned forever because I compromised for a small life. I'm already old. Death will come anyway. And it is far more beautiful to accept that, because then that also becomes meaningful. I am accepting it on the grounds that even death cannot stop me from speaking. And thousands of years later, Socrates is still speaking.
Yeah.
Even in his death, he is still speaking. That the truth has no compromise, knows no compromise.
Mm-hmm. I'm going to go to a super chat in just a second, but my favorite part of that was what he said, my speaking of the truth is the same thing as living. So if I can't speak the truth, then I don't even want to live. It's synonymous. That's very interesting. And it reminds me of the Bible verse, I'm the truth, the way, and the life, or like the word is, there's that kind of Bible verse where like the word is the life, is the, that kind of a complex topic, but that's very profound. I got a super chat from Nicholas at Night. Thank you so much for the $20, sir. He says, as a man with a family, how can I reconcile with the fear of persecution that may lead to the penitentiary, leaving a wife and young kids without a provider and father to help raise them? God bless you, Greg and Artur. Did you want to take a stab at answering this?
Well, you have to answer yourself this question: what is life? If your entire life is this, the tangible thing, the things you see and hear and smell and taste, and then I pity you. Because we have to understand that life is so much more than the tangible things that we see all around us. Every man deep inside knows there is eternity. Every man knows there's something on the other side. And the Bible is very clear. God is very clear. He says, the eye have not seen and the ear have not heard what the mighty things the Lord has prepared for those that love him. So in other words, when you go through this life, You're only passing through. This is not real life. This is just a taste of what's coming, and what's coming is far greater than this little what we see right now, or we can taste right now.
Yeah. And not to have a less spiritual answer, but I do think there is sort of, not everyone is an Artur Pawlowski. Not everyone is an outspoken dissident. Not everybody has a platform. Not everybody has the gift of gab. That's just the way it is. Certain people are more kind of positioned to have a platform and to lead a movement and to really make an impact. And because some people ask me like, well, what am I going to do? What can I do to like help the cause? And sometimes it's something that's behind the scenes. It's, I think this is something Chris Rock said, but it's like, sometimes you have to play the tambourine. You're not always going to be lead guitar. You're not always going to be lead singer, but like sometimes you can really, keep the rhythm in the background and do something that might seem small, might seem insignificant, might seem unglamorous, but sometimes just raising your kids to the best of your ability, sometimes that can be the best possible thing you can do in a given situation.
Listen. Let me just give you this for your viewer, because I think it's very powerful. During the communist era in Romania, there was this man, Wurmbrand was his name, Richard Wurmbrand. He was the one that wrote the book Tortured for Christ and created Voice of the Martyrs. And he was at this gathering of 4,000 clergy during communism. The government invited the clergy, the pastors, the priests to come to this event, and they told them that they must submit themselves and the churches to communism and socialism. And 99% majority of those pastors agreed publicly and did it. So as Wurmbrand, Richard was listening to this and watching this with his wife, here are his accounts from the book Torture for Christ. He said, my wife and I were present at this Congress. Sabina, that's his wife, told me, Richard, stand up and wash away this shame from the face of Christ. They're spitting in his face. I said to her, if I do so, you lose your husband. She replied, I don't wish to have a coward as a husband.
Very good.
Real story. He spent 14 years in prison, tortured. I mean, they've done horrible things. She spent 3 years in prison.
My one of my favorite Bible stories or like moments, and hopefully you can fill in the blanks here because I don't know it very well, but I'm pretty sure it's right before Jesus gets crucified and he's like in prison, in the Roman prison or whatever it is. And I think it's Peter or like one of his disciples is like almost trying to talk him out of it, or he's like trying to like say, hey, Jesus, like maybe you shouldn't go through with this or something like this. And then Jesus talks to his number one disciple. He's like you're of the devil, like get away from me. Like you're totally you're wrong. You don't know what I'm talking about? Maybe you can explain it better.
Yeah, that was Jesus was not arrested yet. He just tells them that he will suffer greatly. And Peter goes to him and says, not so. It's not going to happen. In other words, Peter was a very foolish man, said, we will defend you. We'll fight. This will never happen. We will do what needs to be done. Jesus looks at him and says, get behind me, Satan, because you're not thinking of what's godly, what's good, but what's temporary, what's in a flesh, in other words, to paraphrase. Of course, Peter underestimated fear in his own life, in his own heart, because just few moments in the Bible, few chapters later, he 3 times denies Jesus of even knowing him. So here's this man that will fight for Jesus. It will never happen. And then when the taste came in his own life,
I don't know the guy. Sorry.
I don't know. Actually, it says that he cursed. He starts cursing. So I don't know the man. You've got the wrong guy. I don't know the man. And of course, at that time, Jesus looked at him, and Peter started to weep because he realized that he was so weak. And we have to understand, Apostle writes and says, in my weakness, his strength can manifest. So you cannot go into suffering. You cannot go and do certain things, even preach the truth, unless God gives you the boldness and the courage. And that's why my book is called Lions Do Not Bow, because you have to realize, first of all, you have to realize who you are in God. How mighty is your God? How amazing is your God? Do you even know who is your God? He's the Alpha and Omega, he's the beginning and the end. And also you must know who you are in God. You're the son of the living God. You're a daughter of the Almighty Creator of heavens and the earth. So when you understand that concept, Apostle writes and he says, what man then can do to me? In the end of the day, okay, they're going to kill you. And the Bible says, you're going to have an extra perks in heaven because you died as a martyr.
I want to get, we should start getting into the direction of wrapping it up. But I wanted to ask something that's been on my mind. I've tweeted about it, and it's really kind of bothering me when it comes to specifically C-9 and how it was passed and who supported it and who did not support it. And this might get, personally, I think this is an uncomfortable topic, especially as, a Christian person. And, the term Judeo-Christian value gets thrown around a lot. But when it comes to the different religious groups, if we summarize it, you have Christians, Jews, and Muslims. Those are kind of the three most popular religions. When it comes to C-9, which the politicians said this is going to criminalize parts of the Bible. That part was not quiet. That part was out loud. But the major groups who opposed it, it was mostly Christian groups, and it was mostly Muslim groups. Unfortunately, there was the biggest Jewish groups, the biggest Jewish lobbies in the country were supporting Bill C-9. And, I don't want this to become like a biblical thing of like, who did the Jews kill Christ and all. We don't have to go into all that. But, when you see something like this, I have the thing right here, joint statement by 5 Jewish organizations, B'nai B'rith, obviously CIJA and a few others. Quite frankly, they are the largest Jewish lobbies in the country. They supported criminalizing the Bible. Like, what comes to mind when you see this, Artur?
Well, the same thing is people are people. Politics plays a big part. I mean, conservative governments, right? Under Harper, which, as you know, I have been invited to his barbecues every year, and I was able to chat and, see things from the inside. It was actually not the liberal government that brought trouble to our country. It was Stephen Harper. We have to understand he was flip-flopping politician. He was not really conservative. And it was Stephen Harper that brought WEF to Canada. So out of all the politicians that we had, and, you can look at Justin Trudeau Castro, and you can look at the Carnage and, Carney and all those psychopaths, and you can say, well, they're wicked people, they're liberals. But hey, hold your horses. It was not the liberals that signed us into the WEF that unleashed hell on us during COVID era. It was actually Pierre Poilievre that signed us into the Paris Accord. So if you're complaining about the carbon tax that is wiping Canadian middle class left and right and creates poverty left and right, it was not the liberal government. Liberal government is just finishing us off. It was the conservative government. It was Pierre Poilievre that signed the Paris Accord for the conservative government. So we have to understand that those, just because they say something, just because you say I'm a Christian, it means nothing to me. Nothing. I mean, it's just a title. I don't care what you say. People say all kinds of crazy things. I mean, if you don't believe me, look at our politicians. Today they will say one thing. Tomorrow they will say completely different thing. It means nothing. Words mean nothing anymore is your actions. Are you truly a Christian? Show me your life. Show me what you stand for, what you're pushing every day, what's on your heart. Are you willing to do the right thing? Are you a conservative? Okay, show me by the way you vote, but what you do, that you are a conservative. And of course, what I observed in the past 20 years, that the conservatives are not even near conservatism. They're liberal as a liberal you can be. There's nothing conservative about conservative party anymore. They're not even fiscally. They used to be fiscally conservative. No longer, if you really look at the statistics, it was the conservative government that blew up more billions of dollars than the NDP. And I know that's a shocker, but that's the truth. A conservative government blew up more billions, wasted more billions of dollars in the province of Alberta than the NDP, which, of course, they're throwing money left and right like crazy. So we have fallen off the rail long time ago. And the same with Christianity, the same with Judaism. Just because you say you're a Jew, what that even means? It means nothing to me unless you show it to me by your fruits. Are you standing for Torah? Are you willing to pay the price for Torah? Are you teaching what Torah is teaching? And are you living by the Torah? If you're not, you're fake. You're not a real child of the living God. You're a child of the devil. And the same with Christians, the same with all religions. By the fruits you shall know them. If your fruits are rotten, if you want to blow up people and chop their heads off, you're a psycho. You're a wicked son of the devil. Not the son of God. You're a son of the devil. You're a terrorist.
Yeah, I think I've gravitated towards becoming Christian out of sheer desperation, because day after day, especially during COVID, you have the whole George Floyd madness. There's like race wars starting seemingly, and then we're coming after the unvaccinated, and there's just more. You try to watch these politicians without throwing up, and it's like, hey, these people just seem so pure evil, and that's why I've gravitated towards Christ, having some faith in these principalities of good and evil, because clearly evil is thriving right now. And I just think of leading up to C-9, we have over 100 churches burning to the ground. And they talk about how this bill is going to protect religious groups. By the way, we are going to criminalize verses in the Bible, and that's hate speech, and we're going to throw Christians in jail if you read this part. And it's like,
including our church. Remember, our church was lit on fire as well, and our children's bus was burned to the ground.
Yet, all the Christians who are saying, hey, we're being hated upon, we're the ones who are actually victims to this. We don't want this bill, by the way, and just completely kind of dismissed. Certain religious groups got what they wanted. The Jewish lobby got what they wanted with Bill C-9. And the Muslims and the Christians complaining about it, the Christians who have had over 100 places of worship burnt to the ground. I don't know how we're measuring who's the most hated, but that certainly seems, it just seems very evil. It's like all these omens of where things are going. And it's, if more people don't get back to the church and get back to Christ, I don't really know how this is going to shake out. How do you think this is going to shake out?
It's lost. We're completely finished. Canada is done. It's you can't fix this, Greg, without God. You cannot fix even economy. Forget about moral standards. You can't fix our economy. We're so far into a point of no return without a supernatural. So, of course, there is hope if Canadian society would turn back to God. I truly believe that God, the moment he steps in, he brings supernatural and things can start going the right direction. I just don't see, Greg, Canadians desiring God. Actually, quite opposite. It looks like they hate him even more and more and more. It's like they're bent on destruction, Greg. It's like they're on the path of self-elimination. especially the white people. They don't want to have children. The 55% divorce rate. They hate themselves for being white. I don't get it. I don't understand. We're in a big trouble because we walked away from God. So the way I see everything playing, I believe that the economy is going to collapse. I believe a lot of Canadians are going to lose their properties. They're going to lose their money. And I think out of the ashes, we can start rebuilding. I think that's how it's going to play. The politicians are not capable even of fixing our problem because they're playing for the globalists. They are working for the foreign entities. So how can they fix it? Something that they have no desire of fixing. They are breaking everything they are touching. And then Canadians, they don't want good politicians. That's the problem, Greg. They don't want good people in power. They actually hate good people. The good people are constantly under attack by the even the freedom movement here, the separatists and referendum people here. They kill each other. They fight each other like crazy. They don't want God to be in the middle. They want to fix this politically. And look, scandal after scandal, flop after flop. I don't want to even bring the latest, but it's a disaster. And I remember, and I was highly criticized. I actually I lost people in the church for it because I said from the very beginning, because God told us this is going nowhere. There is not going to be a separation. You will not get your independence because you're fighting the forces that are so much stronger than Alberta. The only person that can bring sanity and strength to the movement is God, but they don't really want God. They want lawyers and they want business people and politicians. No, you're too weak.
We've had a lot of success so far with the Dominion Society of Canada, which is a group that supports Canadian nationalism and is promoting remigration, the reversal of immigration. But I bring it up because we are bringing together, like we're organizing people. We're starting these kind of different communities of people, different chapters across the country. And I know it's working because a lot of people are trying to call us racist and we're getting this kind of like mainstream kind of attention defending monuments, defending the Samuel de Champlain monuments, like defending the very kind of like historical facts which are true about this country. And we're just simply defending it, stating the facts, and it's upsetting a lot of people. And I guess you're over in Alberta. Is there any type of organizing over there that you think is promising? Yes, you said it's all going to smolder into ashes. We'll see how it shakes out. But is there any organizing over there in Alberta that you think is promising and that you think people should be paying attention to?
No.
Or is it just street search on Sunday where you feed the homeless? And there's also the you do your sermoning on Saturdays.
Well, I'm also a leader of Solidarity Movement of Alberta. And that's why I'm saying no, because the last time we were running against the very people that locked us like animals and destroyed our lives, businesses, and killed so many people, the Conservative government in Alberta. So when I think we had 54 or 60 candidates. And when I started to hear people in different communities opposing us, I realized, I think in the first time in a long time, that there's no fixing it at this moment. Because so you've got wicked, evil tyrants that destroyed you and your family, but you are more afraid of bigger tyrants. Therefore, in your own mind, in your heart, you're willing to settle for the lesser of two evils. And that's what was being told to me over and over again. Art, we love what you stand for. We love what you're offering, freedom and economy and this and that. However, if we don't vote for the lesser of two evils, in other words, if
Don't
like
split the vote. Don't split the
yeah,
vote.
like
Yeah.
yeah, like a Stockholm syndrome, that they are so attached to the abusers that they do not see a way out of it. They must keep voting for the abusers, the rapists, to be here, because bigger rapists, bigger abusers will come and finish them off. And of course, it's a lie. It's a political big fat lie. Splitting the white votes and all that stuff. I've heard it all. Because, Greg, if every good person, and I'm going kind of back to you saying we must draw a line somewhere. So I'm kind of going back to that notion. When enough good people will have enough of this flip-flopping, lying, and settling for evil, just a little bit lesser of the two evils, if good people will start voting for good candidates, eventually, maybe not the first time, but eventually, we would have good people in power. Eventually, right? Because we have to understand that every political party starts the same way. So 5 people sipping a coffee in their living room saying, I hate what those people are doing. Let's do something about it. And then it's 50 people, then it's 5,000 people, then it's 100,000 people, and then you win election. It takes time. It takes sometimes years, but you got to start somewhere. But here's my problem. That's why I told you I don't see any way out of this at this moment, because I do not see the electorate willing to vote for good candidates. I just don't see that. And even now, we're heading into election next year. Again, I see the same rhetorics. Oh, we have to vote for conservatives. If we will not vote for the conservatives, again, they're not conservatives. So why you keep repeating this lie? They're not conservatives. They're liberals. Different color, but liberal, nevertheless. So, this is the problem. This is why I believe this whole thing has to crumble, because out of pain, Greg, out of difficulties, people start looking for real solutions, because they will realize what we are saying for the past 20 some years, that this is not working. The two-party system is no longer working. We have to have new players, new outsiders, brand new, with new visions, new energy, not tinted by globalists, not tinted by bribery, not tinted by blackmail, pedophilia, homosexual rainbow lobby, not tinted by all of that.
That's enough about Jason Kenney.
And Jason Kenney is coming out of the woodwork again, and he is portraying himself as a conservative champion.
Dude,
Can you
it's
believe
crazy.
it?
It's crazy. Jason Kenney's calling us racist at Dominion Society. And he's like, oh, well, I really care about immigration. It's like, you're actually guilty of, you're kind of abusing our immigration system. Anyway, I don't want to get off on Jason Kenney, but I do want to say one last thing, which is, I think the hyperfixation on like the next election and the political parties, I've been doing this for a little while, and I feel like it's almost like that's not the right place to focus. Like, it's almost like we need to kind of create a cultural movement around specific issues which we will not compromise on. Because when you talk about these different issues, there's a lot of, like, for Dominion Society, we're focusing on immigration. I think that's why we're getting so popular. We're focusing on that one issue, immigration, upholding Canadian history and identity. And like, a lot of people are coming into the fold, and then we're putting pressure on the different political people, different political, politicians. And I'm wondering, I know there's a lot of different Christian movements and groups, and I'm like, what if it kind of collectivized more about having kind of a united sort of, these are the few things, like, men and women and this and that, or whatever it might be. But like creating something that's outside of the political parties, and then just simply starts to change the culture, create videos, like do events, and really kind of get the culture moving in that direction. Because then these slimy politicians they'll actually try to pander to
Yeah.
you know, if it's enough votes, right? Because we've seen every single politician put on a turban, ba like, you know, start speaking in some foreign language to try and get those votes. And it's like, we got to start deploying the same thing as, you know, as Christians.
They're professional prostitutes. They're high-end call girls. Those politicians. They're prostitutes. That's what they are.
You're making me think of a good like sketch where you're looking through you know, different call girls, but it's actually, oh, these are different politicians. Oh, okay. Oh, wow, Daniel Smith's pretty cheap, actually. That's not bad.
Yeah, I mean, well, it depends. There is this rumor going, allegedly, about the little rabbit that she brought from Saudi Arabia. I think it was made of gold that no one knows where it is. So I don't know, worth millions of dollars. So not really cheap. But anyway, going back to the story, what you just said, I 100% agree. I mean, Charlie Kirk understood that, and that's why he was going to universities, he was going to colleges, because he wanted to change the culture. Culture eventually will change the politics, because politicians are cowards. Politicians are prostitutes, most of them. Politicians are willing to go to bed with every monkey that votes. So when the culture is good, then the politicians will be better. Right now, for the past 30, 40 years, Canadians are not raising the bar for the politicians to be elected. They're actually lowering the bar. I mean, now literally every monkey can win election if you're corrupt enough. If they got goods on you, if you got enough money, you can win election not on merits, but on your bed schedule. If you got enough time in 24 hours to go to bed with as many organizations as possible, you will be elected. So a culture must be changed. But look at the difficulty we have right now. We're not allowed in universities. We're deplatformed, censored. We have a very hard time to communicate the truth with the youth, because that's what the tyrants want. They want propaganda and they want indoctrination. And so it's very difficult to fight them. But again, God is bigger. If enough Christians will come together, then we will win. And as you know, we're suing those demons. We're going after them. I've launched the biggest lawsuit in the history of this country. We're going after Attorney General, prison, City Hall, Chief of Police, Calgary Police, RCMP, customs officers, City of Calgary, because we believe that we will be able to uncover what really happened to the Canadian people, right? Civil litigation has this power to move the stones and to look under the stones and discover. We already got dumped with 300,000 documents. And I can tell you, Greg, already we have some absolutely juicy stuff for the Canadians to hear. Officer conversations, crazy. Your hair would stand up if I would be able to tell you what we have uncovered. And this is just the beginning. But that's why they're fighting us to the death. They're opposing us. They want to destroy me financially. They don't want me to have ability to raise the funds. It's a war. We are in the middle of war, good versus evil.
Absolutely. And I'm going to play a clip from our interview that we had for my upcoming documentary. We go over a lot of stuff in that interview. I'll be posting the full-length documentary at some point, the full-length interview at some point. But before we go, I thought it would be funny because I was checking your Twitter feed, and I saw this video of you getting thrown in a cop car, and I'm like, I haven't actually seen this one. So could you explain the context of this here when you're getting thrown in the cop car? It looks like in the winter you got people with muzzles on in the back. You're trying to record it here.
Yeah. So we got arrested, me and my brother David, for attending a peaceful rally. I was asked to attend a rally because there were some individuals that were thinking of going on a private property and intimidating the family. And so they called me. Some people called me, says, "Come, Art, keep the peace." So that's why I came. I came to keep the peace. I came to stop those crazy people. Maybe they were government operatives of entering private property. And for that, I was criminally charged for attending a rally, taken to jail. My brother David was arrested as well. But that's the system. They will pile things up on you. They will make stuff up. They will look for anything to hurt you. The system, Greg, works this way. If we want to hurt Greg, let's do one thing. And on top of that one thing, let's pile 20, 30 other things as well. So we will overwhelm Greg with all this craziness, technicalities, courts, submissions, lawyers, interviews, you name it. And Greg is going to feel like, oh my God, I don't stand a chance against these 20, 30 charges. And the Crown prosecutor will come to you, and they did it twice. They came twice to me, and they said, we will withdraw every charge except one if you say you're sorry. That's the game. The game is rigged. There are professional liars like Stephen Johnston and Matt Delotovich. The judges like Adam Germain, Gordon Krinke, David Gates, John Rook, the Crook, as I call him. Those are professional liars. But they have officers, the Crown prosecutors and the judges, and they think they're above the law. We caught Crown prosecutor Stephen Johnston on multiple lies, Greg. And he's still working. He lies to the judges, and he's still a Crown prosecutor, unshaken, unmoved.
Yeah.
Not under investigation. They can lie, they can cheat, they can manipulate, and unfortunately, the system protects them.
Yeah. And you just touched upon, I think, why C-9 and bills like it are most chilling. The piling on of the charges. In C-9, there's a motivated by hate charge, which you can stack. It's literally designed to be stacked on to another existing charge. I don't even know if this has even existed in our criminal code before, but it's a law that's designed to just be stacked on top of another law to say, well, also the mischief of that protest, or that was actually motivated by hatred as well. So let's add on some extra time and another charge. And like you said, overwhelming this person who, are they actually a criminal, or are they just a dissident? Are they just someone who has the wrong opinion? And that's why they're being, piled on with all these BS charges. So
and look at England, look at Ireland. You got tens of thousands of people already being charged with hate-motivated crimes for tweeting, for putting stuff on Facebook. Truth. They're just truth. I mean,
and it's a public place. Posting something on Twitter, having a video on the internet, that is a public place. So all that stuff, it could be subject to C-9 charges.
You can, Greg, you can go to prison in Great Britain if you say, remove illegal rapists out of our country. You can go to prison for that.
Yeah, I was talking to a nationalist from Germany, and he said that even saying criminal migrant, even like putting those two words together, is like, it could be a crime because it's like something that's unfair, it's offensive to people. And that's, again, like, this is why C-9 is so chilling. It's the beginning of crossing that Rubicon, crossing that threshold of like, okay, my offended feelings, we can actually turn that into criminal charges now, because that's usually how this whole thing happens. And then maybe a quick note on that, because I've been asking my guests, different dissidents, before C-9 comes into effect. Ultimately, when it comes to some of these insane charges, specifically for speech, calling it criminal, it always comes down to someone who's upset, someone who's crying. It's a homosexual, it's a transgender who thinks Pastor Art, his opinion is actually physically hurting me, and the only way to keep me safe is to lock him behind bars or something. Do you like summarize this phenomena? How do you summarize this phenomena of like insulating this person's feelings?
Well, it's not about feelings of transgender or homosexual. It's about tyranny of the government. Don't kid yourself. They are using the homosexuals. They're using the transgender. They're using the colors, divide and conquer. They're using the natives to divide and conquer. It's all a game, because a nation that is divided, it's a nation that is very easily to be controlled. You can control a divided family. You can control a divided city. That's the number one thing if it comes to warfare. Divide them. That's what they're doing. They don't care about your feelings. Don't kid yourself. They don't care. They want control. And this just gives them control. Under communism, behind the Iron Curtain, the politicians there, the communists, didn't care about communism and socialism. I'm telling you, they didn't care. They were part of the system that was giving them perks. It was giving them bonuses. It was giving them power and control. That's what they care. And nothing is new right now. They don't kid yourself. You will have few zealots, psychopathic, crazy people that are communists and socialists or fascists, but majority of the politicians, they just want power and control and money. That's all. They don't care about anything else. They care about keeping their power intact, and of course money and all those different perks that they get. That's why you've got politicians flip-flopping all the time.
Yeah.
That's the proof to my theory of, high-end call girl, because they don't care. They care about the client, you, as long as you pay. But then an hour later is another client, and they're going to say the same thing to that other client. I love you. I care for you. It's so awesome. You're the best. And then an hour from that client, there will be a different person, and they will say exactly the same thing to those people. They're flip-flopping high-end call girls, those politicians.
Yep.
They have no backbone. They have no moral standards. They're wicked. Many of them are actually evil people doing this for all the wrong motives. But in a flip side, when you do bring a good man, someone that wants to fix the problem, what do people do? You're splitting the votes. You're jeopardizing, our province, because now the NDP is going to win. And I yelled and I screamed. I said, they're all the same. Why can't you see this? NDP, communists and socialists, crazy people, conservatives that are traitors, and the liberals that are psychos. You've got all the same uniparty forwarding the same globalistic agenda. Why can't you see that? But they can't. They can't. That steak on the plate smells so good. That hockey game, that golfing smells so good. They don't want to hear truth. They don't want to hear reason. They just want to keep doing the same thing that has been destroying them from the very beginning. That reminds me of this video that I saw, and Canadians are like that, unfortunately, of a snake that eats its own tail. Mm-hmm. That's Canadians. That's Canada right now. They are eating their own tail. Well, for a while, you will succeed. For a while, you will feel satisfied, but you will choke on your own tail. It's just a matter of time.
Yeah. I'm just admiring this video here. This is your brother. It looks like, with that beard, he just looks like you from like several years earlier. But this is you guys talking about the update on the lawsuit. Make sure you guys are following Artur Pawlowski on Twitter if you're not already. Is there anything that you wanted to promote and talk about before we go, Artur?
Yeah, well, get the book, the most hated book in the country that, remember, was confiscated by the Canadian government 3 times. So if the Canadian government confiscates your manuscript, that means every Canadian should read it out of curiosity. So Amazon.com, please get it. We don't get much from the book, but every dollar counts. And if you can, please support our fight. I mean, lawyers are hundreds of thousands of dollars, literally hundreds of thousands of dollars. This fight, we got two legal teams, criminal and civil rights lawyers, and we are fighting for the liberties of Canadians, not just for ourselves. And if you have a desire to support,
go to arturpawlowski.ca, or where do they go?
no, it's streetchurch.ca, streetchurch.ca. You can go to legal fight over there. There are all kinds of ways that you can donate and support. And please do if you can. I always say to the people, one man cannot do it, one family cannot do it, one church cannot do it. But if we come together and everyone, can chip in a little bit, if you do, it's easier on us. And it's like my lawyers say, you make sure we have fuel in the engine, because those fights are pricey and we don't want to run out of funds, because that's exactly what those tyrants want. They want you not being able to fight them. And when that comes and happens, you're finished, you're done. Then they will be able to do whatever they want to you. Look at Pat King. Today, there is this verdict of reversing the acquittal. And now they want to take this guy, 5, 7, 10 years of imprisonment. And I read a little bit of the judge's reasoning, and they said that I will paraphrase, he terrorized Ontario, he terrorized Ottawa. He's a bad guy. He needs to be locked up because he used criminal activity to terrorize the city. And then judges said that the government did the right thing, but truckers did the bad thing.
It's like being in some sort of legal hell where these charges keep getting resuscitated and renewed and appealed and then counter appealed. The same thing is happening to Randy Hillier. He moved a little police barrier like a couple feet, and then they said that he assaulted police officers, and he thought he was going to get those charges stayed or dropped, but no, the Crown has reappealed or whatever, and it's back on the table again. And obviously they make it very. Yeah,
Process becomes the punishment because they know they have unlimited resources, taxpayers' money, but we have to crowdfund. Sometimes I have to come on the shows like this and beg people, please chip in. But when I do say Greg, I'm called grifter. I'm called thief. You
can't listen to these haters. You can't listen to these haters. You can't listen to these people saying split the vote. I'm telling you, Artur, there's a lot of serpents among us. Okay, we have to be very discerning of these people, and because it's not just Conservative Party people who can be snakes and call girls. I'm sure there's other people among us who are whispering in this ear or that ear, trying to poison the well, trying to snuff us out in the crib. Trying to kill the grassroots movement before it can even sprout up and start to grow. But I'm sure we'll have continued conversations about that. Thank you so much for being on the show. And, I think, needless to say, Canadians got to dig deep. We got to dig deep. This is a historical moment with C-9 coming into effect. In my opinion, this is a major crack, a major lapse in free speech in Canada. And we'll see what happens next. Needless to say, we will be watching and we will be fighting for you. You already have so many court things going on. Hopefully we're not adding too much to the pile. But thank you for being on the show, Artur. Is there anything else you wanted to say before we go?
God bless, and do not be terrified. We know how the story ends. We win in the end. Jesus won on the cross. So just keep trusting, keep believing him. When you show up into the battlefield knowing that the victory is already secured, it's yours, the rest is just a formality. We have already won, the enemy just doesn't know it yet. So be lions, don't bow. And I'm telling you, it's a journey, it's an adventure. And we will see face to face the Judge of Judges one day, and every man will receive what's due to them. So enjoy the ride and receive the crown of life with all the things that he has prepared for you in a kingdom that is coming. So be blessed.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Artur Pawlowski. And I will play the clip from the upcoming documentary. If you do want to support that, I'm going to try to use this documentary to push back against Bill C-34 coming this fall. So if you want to help with that, you can go to givesendgo.com/save free speech. And I'll, instead of doing the outro, I will do the clip from Artur Pawlowski from the documentary.
In 2006, my first arrest, you know the crime I committed? 7 criminal charges. I read the Bible publicly to 6 of my parishioners, no amplification, Tom King's Park in the city of Calgary. Police showed up, told me to stop reading the Bible. I told them, no. Like, why? Well, some people look at you, and we were like hundreds of feet away from people, and they find it offensive that you're reading the Bible to your people. I said, I don't care. They can find it offensive. That's my right. I'm not using amplification. I'm not disturbing peace. I'm not doing anything. I'm just reading the Psalms to my parishioners. And I will continue doing this. Then you will be arrested. I said, fine. So he arrested me. And I was charged with 7 criminal charges, including resisting arrest. Thank God my brother was recording it, because I would be still in prison.